Welcome in, everyone, for our first edition of SEC Live. We will come your way every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time to talk SEC football, what we believe to be the best football conference in America. So based on your responses and your feedback and a number of SEC teams being brought to our attention for requested live streams, that we would put the whole conference together and come your way again every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock Eastern Time for SEC Live. And what a day to start the show, huh? Bombshells dropping all over the conference in regards to game cancellations and COVID tests. When you talk about maybe the greatest college football coach of all time, Nick Saban, us just learning in the last hour that he has tested positive for COVID. We just concluded a live stream. You were probably on board for that. Just concluded a live stream that we launched to respond to the breaking news of Saban and the LSU Florida cancellation, in which the SEC guidelines say that you must have at least 50 players eligible on the roster and clean and with negative test results. And Florida could not hit that standard. Therefore, the Florida football program, just one day after announcing that it was suspending football operations and football practice, was at the root cause of the cancellation against the LSU Tigers. So that game's been moved to tentatively December 12th. The big game of the day, though, of course, coming up this weekend, involves the Georgia Bulldogs headed to Tuscaloosa to take on the Alabama Crimson Tide in what is not even close to being challenged in any way as the most important game of the college football season thus far, and that may last and keep its title for the rest of the season, as we've got Georgia as a slight favorite headed to Alabama. We got Palmer Toms on the line as our first guest, our first SEC Live. Palmer, we appreciate you stopping by to talk some Georgia football. How you doing today?
Doing well. I mean, the news of Nick Saban testing positive for COVID-19 has certainly thrown a wrench in this week and the Georgia's preparation and our coverage of this game. So I'm sure we'll get to all that tonight, and excited to be joining to talk about this big game.
Yeah, so the one thing that catches my attention in regards to the matchup, because the Saban news is something that we've covered for the last couple hours, and there's really nothing else to say. They have not announced who's going to take over as interim coach. I would expect that would be Steve Sarkisian, would be my educated guess on that. And of course, it's another matchup between Saban and another assistant coach, and Kirby Smart being the most celebrated and decorated of those recent assistants, with a national championship appearance against Saban a few years ago and an SEC title game on the line 1 year later. So it's, again, Smart versus not now Saban, but the Saban program, the Saban team in Tuscaloosa. But Georgia playing much better football, especially on the defensive side, where to compare the athletes, you would think, well, the defensive personnel is comparable. But, man, Alabama was just ravaged by Ole Miss last week, where for Georgia, let's focus on the defensive effort that, I looked at today, Palmer, and it's just incredible to look at the numbers against Arkansas, Auburn, and Tennessee, three capable offenses in which they're limiting 2.8 yards per carry, 1.8 yards per carry, -1 yard against Tennessee, barely 50% passing, just around 200 yards total offense in these games. And then these teams are turning around and putting up decent numbers against other teams and giving up next to no points in these games. So the Georgia defense, beyond the numbers, is just flying to the football and showing all that future NFL talent.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation with someone before I joined you, and he was asking me what was my biggest surprise of Georgia so far, and now to say that this Georgia defense has been good and surprising would be, on surface level it would come as a surprise, but I guess what has been surprising about them is just how good they have been. I mean, they're giving up 38.33 yards per game on the ground. You just mentioned those, averages that they've held very good offenses to. I mean, Auburn is an offense that is built on the run game, and in the past they have been, at least. And so Georgia shut them down. Tennessee came in as one of the best offensive football teams in the country in terms of running the ball with that big offensive line, and Georgia held them to -1 yards on the ground. So I guess to me that has been the biggest surprise of Georgia so far, and just the fact that they have been this dominant on defense. I certainly think that that'll be challenged this week with the rushing attack that Alabama brings with Najee Harris. We talked to Kirby Smart earlier this week. He said, on Monday, he said he thinks that Harris is one of the best, if not the best, running backs in the country. And I the film doesn't lie. I definitely think he's up there as one of the best running backs in the entire country. Yesterday we spoke with him, and he said that Harris, causes an issue for Georgia. Just the way that he is so dynamic in the running game and also capable of being used in the passing game. But as Smart pointed out, it's not all Harris. That offensive line is huge. They're averaging 330 across the board with some massive guys at the tackle positions. Jordan Davis is going to be a huge factor in this game for Georgia. Big number 99 in the middle, comes in at 330 pounds, 6'6", 330. If as Smart said, if he could have 3 Jordan Davises lining up on the defensive line this week, he'd feel a lot more confident. And so I think Georgia's ability to plug the middle there with Jordan Davis and be able to keep contained on the outside with the talented outside linebacker room, I think that's going to be one of the key deciding factors in this game.
So Stetson Bennett obviously is the guy that everyone's talking about. He has the target on him in regards to media focus and attention because he's the one guy who's done exceptionally well. But this is the first huge test on a huge stage, which every week in the SEC is a big stage. This one would be enormous, but he has stepped up to every challenge against 3 quality opponents to a certain extent. He's a guy that was a complete afterthought 4 weeks ago, but now he's at the forefront of this enormous game. And to my thought, in watching just about the entire Tennessee game, most of the Arkansas game, and let's see, the Auburn game, watched just about all of that this guy is he's been just playing within himself, doing what the offense requires. He throws the ball on time. He anticipates throws. He's cool under pressure, delivers the ball, mistake-free. The guy's doing the job.
Yeah, I mean, going back to my biggest surprises, if you had told me Stetson Bennett would be Georgia's starting quarterback against Alabama, I would have said that you were crazy. And just looking at the way he's done it, he has been steady Eddie back there. Just his consistency and capability to, make plays with his feet. Georgia hasn't had that in the past with Jake Fromm back there. You kind of, knew where Jake Fromm was going to be, and he was going to be in the pocket. He, showed that he could make a 10-yard scramble for the first down and slide, show off his baseball skills at the first down line, slide for the first down. But, Stetson, if you look at the way that he runs the ball, he's physical. I mean, you look at his touchdown run against Tennessee, his 2-point conversion against Arkansas, he is putting his shoulder down and really challenging defenders. Had a late run in that Tennessee game with the game, decided already. And he's, scrambling for a first down on 3rd down. And, Kirby Smart has even said Stetson's got to get down more often. And I think so. But, you don't want to take away that mentality of a quarterback that is fully confident in himself, running the ball and being physical with it. And I think that confidence is just, what has stood out to me so much about Stetson Bennett. He's confident throwing the ball over the middle. I think that's why Kyrus Jackson has been such a big factor in this Georgia offense so far this season. He's got 300 yards through 3 games. If you had asked me what Georgia receiver is going to have put up those kind of numbers this early, I would have said George Pickens. And Pickens is, putting up, he had a touchdown against Arkansas, had a touchdown against Auburn as well. He's drawn double coverage. And I think a lot of that attention being drawn to the outside for George is opening up a lot of the opportunities in the middle for Kyrus Jackson. And so, but going back to Stetson Bennett, I think just his confidence and his demeanor in the pocket, calm and collected under pressure, and his ability to make plays. he certainly has impressed me so far this season, and I'm excited to see what he can do against an Alabama defense.
Just to keep the water bottles away from George Pickens, I guess.
Yeah, that was certainly a surprising penalty to see, and I know that was one that Kirby Smart was not happy with.
Got Palmer Tom's on the line from Dogs 247 Sports. Of course, Georgia, Alabama, the game of the year thus far, and it should be a huge one in Tuscaloosa, and certainly altered by the news of Nick Saban. One last thing on this would involve Saban and the aura and the dynasty, and now Kirby Smart trying to catch Saban in the SEC and being right there in regards to recruiting and talent and personnel on the field. Was that talked about at all, just in regards to trying to finally get that win against Alabama and show, hey, we're the best in the SEC now?
Yeah, I mean, I think Georgia's had 2 cracks at Nick Saban under Kirby Smart, and Kirby has had 2 cracks at his, former head coach. And I think Georgia has come away from both those games feeling like they easily could have won that. You look back at the 2017 national championship game in January of 2018. Obviously, it comes down to one play in overtime. That game was a game that Georgia was leading by double digits, easily could have won that. Fast forward 12 months later, they're playing in the same stadium, December 2018. Georgia once again ahead double digits, and they easily could have won that. I think you listen to Kirby Smart last year at SEC Media Days. He said the one thing that his team needed to do better was finish games, and I think he was directly addressing those 2 games. The 2 matchups with Alabama, and I think coming away from both those matchups, Georgia knows that they can compete with Alabama, and there aren't that many teams across the country that can line up toe to toe with Alabama and understand we are just as talented, if not more talented, than the team that's lining up across from us, and be able to fully go into that week and into that matchup knowing we've got a chance to win. And so I think for Georgia players, there's certainly a confidence. It's not a fear. It's not an intimidation. There's definitely respect for Alabama and what they've done, but they don't fear them. And I think that's going to be a big factor, especially when you're going into an environment like Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa.
We are 72 hours away from the kickoff in Tuscaloosa, and Georgia visits Alabama. It should be huge. It is, and it should be a close one, I would expect, as it has been the last 2 trips when these 2 got together to decide an SEC and a national championship. Palmer, we appreciate you stopping by. Enjoy the game.
Thanks, Mark. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Palmer. All right. And we learned, again, about 4 or 5 hours ago that one day following the announcement that the Florida football operation would cease, that the cancellation of the game was confirmed against LSU. We got Jackie Franchuli on the line to talk some Gators football with us. Jackie, how you doing tonight?
I'm great, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Did you get a bit of a more of a heads up than the rest of us, or did you see this coming maybe a day early when it was just maybe a matter of time that there would be a cancellation of the game when we knew what the situation was within the Florida football operation?
So I started hearing rumblings a little bit on Monday morning about a possible outbreak. However, we didn't know the amount of players involved. I had only heard that one particular position group was hit really hard and that we were going to expect freshmen to start on the defensive side of the ball. So that's how this started on Monday. And then it slowly deteriorated. And it's kind of like how Scott Strickland talked about in his timeline, how when he first started, it was just, guys were showing symptoms on Sunday night and told the trainer that. And then the trainer told Scott Strickland, and they were still awaiting the results from those COVID tests that they took on Sunday, which is part of the SEC protocol. And then slowly on Monday, I kept hearing that the LSU game was in jeopardy. And I was thinking, okay, well, if you're just talking about one position group, this can't be just, we were hearing 5 positive cases, which aligned what we got on Tuesday, that first round of COVID positive tests. But then, we were hearing again saying, no, this is going to be worse than we expected. And that's when everything kind kind of went on its head on Tuesday, where we figured out that it was 19 confirmed positive cases at that point from the Tuesday positive case. The Alligator did a good job of reporting the actual number first, and it was 19 positive cases. And then Mullen today reaffirmed that those positive cases happened on Tuesday, and they retested on Wednesday. Those positive cases also included 2 assistant coaches from those 19 on Tuesday. And then Scott Strickland again today, after they retested, they actually had more positive cases. They had 21 players test positive. 18 of those are on scholarship, and also 2 assistants. So that's a lot of people now with a positive case. Now the problem, Mark, now is contact tracing. You got to figure out which guys were with who, and you got to see if you're on a line. You're obviously really atop of each other when you're practicing in the trenches. You obviously had some of these guys showing symptoms on a plane going to College Station, traveling together in a bus, traveling together on a plane, probably rooming together in the hotel room when you're on the road. So then that's contact tracing. That's when the problem kind of lied for Florida. They had less than 50 scholarship players available. And now the question now, Mark, will they even have scholarship players available come next week to Missouri? Because the problem is not the 21 players that tested positive, because those guys have 10 days, according to CDC guidelines, once you test negative. And I think the process is from start of the infection where you show symptoms to the end, they say 10 days. The problem is those guys that are kind of so singled out for contact tracing, they need to be isolated or in quarantine for 14 days. 14 days from exposure, which means if they were exposed on Sunday, Monday, guess what? They won't be available for Missouri. So the amount of players that involves, that's a problem for Florida. That means that Missouri game is in jeopardy. And honestly, if you do the math, it's turning into highly unlikely that will be played. So there's a lot of things that we're still monitoring moving forward.
So you threw a lot of numbers at us, and those are the numbers that I confirmed in regards to the number of players, the contact tracing, and so forth and so on, and the scholarship players. So the key number there in regards to, there's a number of numbers that could be pointed to that would cause a cancellation of a game, but
right.
the number, that 50 scholarship players, was the key one in regards to not having that many available that caused the cancellation, correct?
Right. So the SEC doesn't really have like a concrete mandate. They suggest, I believe it's I think it's 53 scholarship players or 56. It's either 53 or 56. But then they also require they suggest certain number of offensive linemen, certain number of defensive linemen, a quarterback, and they also suggest having 1 center on scholarship. So these are some of the guidelines the SEC did back, I believe, in August when they first said all these guidelines for continuation. And Florida just didn't have those numbers. We don't know exactly, which position groups were affected, because we don't know all the names. That obviously the players are not going to release the players. We do know there was one particular position group that was pretty much eliminated. So it is going to be an interesting thing of how they're going to handle this contact tracing and how that's going to affect Missouri. Again, some of these guys might turn positive in this couple of days. Don't forget the incubation period of COVID-19. I feel like I'm learning a lot about what incubation period means. It takes maybe 5-6 days for you to have symptoms possibly. And then, some people may only have symptoms 10 days after. So it's going to be a roller coaster ride to kind of figure out if this Missouri game is going to happen. And then the SEC could possibly be scrambling to reschedule 2 games now. LSU and Florida is scheduled for December 12th at the moment. But, Missouri could be, also a game that they're going to reschedule as well. So
in the aftermath of a loss on the road at Kyle Field against Texas A&M on a last-second field goal, that would normally be the talk of our discussion right here. Right. Certainly it was trumped by the cancellation of the LSU game and then the uncertainty and jeopardy for Missouri the next week. We got Jackie Franchuli on the line from allgators.com on the SI platform. So, Jackie, I guess the only bright side I can come up with is it gives Todd Grantham and company more time to fix what's been a pretty bad defense.
It hasn't been the best couple of days in general for them. The defense has not had a good season, and plus all this COVID-19. When you look at that defense, you didn't expect it to be the way they are right now. When you look down that roster, Mark, we talked about this. This staff has done a really good job on the recruiting trail as far as recruiting on the defensive side of the ball. Now, I think one of the things that kind of bit them a little bit was something that we were praising them, was that they recruit players that are versatile and they can move around different positions. Now, at the same time, because they're recruiting versatile players and that can play multiple positions, I feel like a lot of players aren't being trained as an expert at their particular position. They're moving around so much, they're not becoming the best at that position. They're getting the job done, or not even getting the job done in some occasions. So I feel like sometimes because they're cross-training so much, they're not becoming experts in that position. You've got so many people filing in at star. You know, a couple years ago during the first week when Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was taking first year of Todd Grantham, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was at star and he did great, but he was the only guy at that position. Then, you know, Amari Burney was his backup. Then fast forward a year, Amari Burney moved to linebacker, and then they had the Trey Dean experiment, didn't work. Then Marco Wilson took over that role. And then this year, you know, you have a plethora of players playing that position. You had, you know, Brandon Stewart played that position and against Texas A&M. So there hasn't been that consistency. And then you put in the fact that Kyrie Campbell has not played yet this season. There's some uncertainty of when he'll be available or if he will even be available this year. And that makes that defensive front undersized. With them being undersized and then those guys in the front moving to different positions, then now you have a question, can they get pressure on the quarterback? Because they certainly didn't do that in College Station. They provided no pressure at all. I feel like, you know, Kellen Mond could go flip some pancakes and come back and still be able to catch 5 yards. That's how much time he had under center. So I feel like that's something that they need to do. And that secondary also, you know, they're not positioning themselves well. There's a lot of questions when it comes to this defense, tackling, letting those big plays happen on 3rd and 10, letting them stay on the field. There's only so much that the offense can do. And it's quite unfortunate if you're a Florida fan, because you're watching probably one of their best offenses in probably a decade. And then it's now you're relying on the offense to remain perfect because the defense, you know, keeps it on the field. I think there's a couple of fans joking that why don't you just kick an onside kick because it's probably have a better chance of getting the ball back. So that's quite when you look at it, it is quite unfortunate for Florida fans when you finally have an offense who's producing so much. You look at Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts and what they've been able to do this year. And you're talking Heisman quality performances. So I can see the frustration of people on the team, but as well as the fans watching this.
Yeah, no question about that. Another banner day for Kyle Trask, 312 yards, 3 TDs, no picks. And Kyle Pitts has 7 touchdowns receiving already in 3 games. So we'll leave the offense alone. We know it's a great offense. And we'll leave you with this, Jackie, in regards to there was much made of Dan Mullen's comments after the Texas A&M game about the fans in the stands causing some disruption and possibly impacting the game. And then obviously him winning a full stadium. We'll leave that portion of it alone. But how did you interpret his statement about it? Just strikes most funny, as it did me, that a man who's been walking in SEC stadiums with 90 and 100,000 people for 15 years would complain about 22,000 people in a stadium.
When I heard him, I saw a man that was frustrated at what was going on in the field. He was frustrated and he was looking for an out. And I feel like the crowd was an easy out. Now, don't get me wrong. I think he voiced it not in a best way. When he was talking about that, I thought he was going to approach and saying like the SEC should have a uniform rule across all teams about how much capacity they should have at a stadium, because they don't have that. They're saying basically each team or program can kind of say how many fans and what the capacity limitations are, as far as, you know, if it's 20%, 25%. Florida has 17,000. Texas A&M has 25,000, I believe, is their limit. So I thought he was going to bring up that point. When he brought up Pack the Swamp at 90,000, that was probably the most ill-advised comment you can do in the middle of a pandemic. And then a couple of days later, your team can't field the team because there's a COVID outbreak. Probably not the best couple of days if you're a man called Dan Mullen when it comes to that. But when I heard that comment, I thought he was going to talk about what he mentioned back in, August. He actually had voiced this actual opinion that he wanted more uniformity among SEC guidelines across teams. He wanted, stadiums to be about the same capacity. So I think when he said that, it was a man frustrated at what the defense was producing. It was, 3 games in a row where the defense was not producing to the level they expected. So I get that. It's just that I think he voiced it in the wrong way. And I think he kind of buried himself a little bit because it kind of kept going and going. And Monday, he never really backed off of it. He kind of shaked off the question and saying that, he was preparing for LSU rather than, talking about that, maybe he misspoke. And then he did kind of mention it, saying that he wants, just a great game day atmosphere. Didn't say about Pack the Swamp on Monday. It took him until actually Wednesday during SEC teleconference to say, hey, I think I not misspoke, saying out of context, I think is what he was saying. It was more like, I wanted to say that we needed a game day atmosphere that was great, and I wanted a game day atmosphere where we can have more fans in, but also following local health officials and the U.S. health system. So he kind of backtracked a little bit, but it took him a couple of days, which wasn't the best look for Dan Mullen.
You can catch Jackie Franchuli's work at allgators.com on si.com. Jackie, we appreciate you stopping by. We may not see Florida football for quite some time, but hopefully everyone's healthy and safe and do the right things, which we know they will in the SEC with Greg Sankey's leadership. And we will see Florida football back on the field with a lot of important games, obviously, on the horizon. Jackie, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Our next guy on the line, here we go. We got Will Gunter coming up here from the all-new early game at 107.5 The Game in Columbia. Will, it's been a while. How you been?
Good. Staying busy and enjoying what is actually fall weather, which is nice to have around here this time of year. Kind of feels a little bit normal.
Define fall weather for me, Will. I'm sitting up here in Connecticut, and it was a beautiful day here. I have no complaints, high 60s, nice and sunny. So what's fall weather in South Carolina?
That would be a mid-60s night with no humidity. I can sleep with the doors open and not have to worry about bugs crawling in and trying to curl up next to me.
It's been a while since Will's been on. He's joined us for years and years and years, talking South Carolina and the SEC and the nation, wherever we want to take the conversation. But we'll start there with the Gamecocks and Will Muschamp. Coming off a huge win against Vanderbilt in the score column, but of course an expected win there. Anything on the field that you saw from the Gamecocks against a Vandy team that's, of course, lost 3 consecutive games that you can take into future games, starting with Auburn there in Columbia, that makes you hopeful that that there are more wins to come?
They continue to build a little bit of an identity offensively. I think we've talked a lot about that on our radio show this week in terms of maybe you're a little bit more impressed with the offense for South Carolina than you knew going in. We knew there would be a void of playmakers. Marshawn Lloyd goes down. One of the top running back recruits in the country goes down during the preseason, and there was a lot of questions at that position. Certainly at quarterback, the grad transfer, Colin Hill, did not know what to expect from him following Mike Bobo from Colorado State. And then the wide receiver position outside of Shi Smith was largely unproven. And so maybe some of those have been answered. We still know that the wide receivers are not very good, but they're trying, I guess. That's the best way we can put it. Outside of Shi Smith, there's still a lot of development that needs to happen. But there does seem to at least be solid play calling and, most importantly, adjustments. And you saw that again on Saturday. I know it's Vanderbilt. I know they were down to 56 players, but South Carolina is able to rattle off 31 points in the second half and go on to get a victory that, quite frankly, Will Muschamp needed, the fan base needed, and the team needed. Something that was kind of an easy breather there late in the fourth quarter.
Colin Hill won the job, of course, over Ryan Helinski. That was a surprise to a lot of people that were outside of following the team day to day and just assumed that Helinski would be the quarterback again. But what does Colin Hill bring to the table with, 3 TDs and 1 pick coming into this week's game?
Well, I'm certainly not an NFL expert, but there have been a lot of rumblings that the young man's potential. He's a big, strong kid, 6'4", 225, 230. He's got, as they tell me, an NFL arm. I guess that means I don't know what that means, but we're trying to find out about it. He's a kid that, again, he's had 3 ACL surgeries. He's not really been able to finish a season, and so with all that being said, it's a kid that we're still kind of learning about, but he does have experience in Mike Bobo's system. He seems to do a good job of getting the Gamecocks in and out of certain plays, and has been a guy that I think so far has directed the offense well. And look, outside, I think South Carolina fans in particular get caught up on the idea of true freshman quarterbacks coming in. Unfortunately for South Carolina, they've had to watch two of the best true freshman quarterbacks I've seen in Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence go up to Clemson and make an impact early on. And if you look around the country, Sam Howell's an example of a guy who's done that. You see some here and there that can go in as freshmen, but Jameis Winston redshirted, Johnny Manziel redshirted. Even at South Carolina, the best quarterback ever, Connor Shaw, had to have a redshirt year. I think it was a little unfair for Ryan Helinski to be thrown out there unexpectedly due to the Jake Bentley injury, but to be thrown out there the way he was his freshman season, you don't get that chance to just learn where your classes are and how to adjust to day in, day out life during a college football season. And again, there's few that can handle that. And I think sometimes in college football, we gloss over just how great or how well guys like Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, certain guys who come in as true freshmen, absolute true freshmen, come in and instantly light up the college football world. And that's very difficult. So I think for Ryan Helinski, getting the opportunity to sit over on the sideline for a year, watch and develop a little bit while a guy like Colin Hill, who's played a good bit at Colorado State, has been beneficial for him through 3 games.
So I saw most of the Tennessee game. Unfortunately, that ended in a situation when, if you're watching the game as a neutral fan, you just want to see a fantastic finish. You just want to see offense on the field, less than 2 minutes on the clock, 75 yards to go, down 4. That's the situation you want to see just as a football fan. And I'm watching the game just as a football fan, don't care who wins. And unfortunately, the muffed punt on the hit the player, and then that ended the game. Saw the game against Florida as well, pretty much start to finish. Didn't see the Vandy game. This Kevin Harris, this kid can play. Did we expect that he was going to be this kind of player?
No, I didn't. There are Gamecock fans. Give credit to those message board people who thought that he had a chance. I mean, this is a kid who had had offers from the Naval Academy, from Air Force, from Army. Was not a heavily recruited kid, but he's a blue collar kid. He shows up, does his duty. They were talking about it. They were talking to some of the people, some of the players yesterday in the press conference setting. They said he goes in there and lifts with the offensive line. He's a kid who loves to lift weights, is a quiet kid, goes about his own business. But I think, for South Carolina fans, a lot of people were excited about Marshawn Lloyd, who was a top 50 recruit, who was a guy who was a borderline 5-star prospect, who chose South Carolina over Georgia and Penn State. And that was a guy that everybody thought would come out and be the go-to guy. He goes down, and there was a lot of concern. I personally thought a young man named Deshaun Fenwick, who is in his 3rd year, would be the guy that could step up. And I'll be honest, you look at what Fenwick's done in terms of yards per carry, I still would like to see Fenwick get the ball more. But I think with Kevin Harris, what you're seeing is a guy who's going to wear teams down. I think the 88-yard touchdown run that he had at the end of the game against Vanderbilt is the anomaly. I don't know if you'll see a ton of those, especially against teams with better speed as opposed to Vanderbilt. But with that being said, I think he's a workhorse back. I think to be successful, he's got to get upwards of 20 carries a game. He's got to wear people down. And again, we'll see how he does. I think he's 2nd in the league behind Najee Harris right now in terms of rushing yardage, which is not something that I think even the most positive Gamecock fan could have expected.
So you get an Auburn team coming in, and I'm a bit surprised to see the point spread only at 3. But when you think when you really look at the Tigers and what they've done thus far this season, they had a gift against Kentucky in the first half. They could have put a touchdown on the board to put the Cats up. They were in a 15-13 game, and then they stretched it out with a fumble at midfield. And so they were fairly fortunate to win that game, and that was the better of the 2 wins. Arkansas has every gripe in the world about the controversy at the end of that game, that the Hogs could have pulled that out on the Plains, and then they only have the 6 points scored against Georgia. So Auburn teetering on a 2-1 season that could be far worse, go to South Carolina. So this is a game in the preseason that I consider Auburn's going to win this game. That now looks like a very winnable game for South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched Auburn a good bit the last 2 weeks. I was very interested in that Auburn-Kentucky game, and obviously it looked like in that game Kentucky should have taken the lead right there before half, and and touchdown didn't exactly get called there. And then you had Auburn, Kentucky throw what should have been a pick six that got called back for targeting. And so with all that in mind, I've watched Auburn against Kentucky. I've watched them against against Arkansas. And I don't know how well early on through three games and I watched them versus Georgia too, how well Bo Nix and Chad Morris are meshing. And you're right. This is a game at the beginning of the season. I think when we looked at the schedules at the beginning of the season, I kind of looked at South Carolina Auburn and said, well, Auburn probably a 6-7 point favorite, but hey, maybe when South Carolina goes to Oxford, Mississippi, they're a favorite. Well, now I look at the game in Oxford is more difficult than the game against Auburn at home. It's funny how we're watching these schedules evolve for SEC teams. So with all that in mind, I'm kind of fascinated to see what Auburn team shows up. Obviously, Tank Bigsby is a guy that narrowed it down to South Carolina and Auburn. The Gamecocks wanted him badly to form a Sony Michel, Nick Chubb type duo with Marshawn Lloyd. That certainly didn't happen. There's a lot of rumors that Tank Bigsby actually shot a commitment video, which I actually kind of believe because there's a picture of him just outside the stadium on a tank because there's a armory right down from the stadium. And so, you look at what Auburn's been able to do the last 2 weeks it's been highlighted by Tank Bigsby picking up some yards in the Georgia game and then obviously going for 260 some odd all-purpose yards last week. So South Carolina's got to stop Tank Bigsby and force Bo Nix to beat him. And then that takes us to maybe our next point, which is that South Carolina secondary, which has been we talk about the running game being a little bit better. Secondary is kind of been a disappointment so far.
Get Will Gunter on the line, 107.5 The Game. His show is the all-new Early Game, and you can catch him right there from Columbia, South Carolina. So I'm going to open it wide open for you, Will, because I know you like to look at the nation, look at the rest of the SEC. The SEC's been in play for 3 weeks, the ACC and the Big 12 2 weeks in addition to that. What has hit you in regards to what's been important or maybe surprised you early on?
Well, I think for starters, I think you look across the board and you see that clearly defense is behind everybody else for what we had in the preseason. What we had in the summer, you still had the opportunity for offensive guys, quarterbacks and wide receivers to go out, maybe develop a little bit of chemistry and do that on. But defenses weren't really able to do that in the same form or fashion. And I think the way you saw a lot of teams have to go through preseason, you're seeing that. I mean, just look at Alabama, obviously, on Saturday night against Mississippi. I'm not going to be a person who sits here and tells you, hey, Alabama's defense is awful and things are changing in Tuscaloosa. I think you look at defenses across the board. I think Florida's got some good players on defense, but, you got to have defense takes a lot of repetition, and you've got to be able to go out and work with it. Outside of Clemson, who, again, playing a couple of JV teams, the Clemson defense looks great, but let's be honest, I don't know what I still think of De'Aaron King in Miami. Wake Forest and Citadel aren't exactly lighting the world on fire. And so I think it's going to be fascinating here, not this weekend, but next weekend when you get the Big Ten involved and we start to analyze Ohio State's defense and maybe Penn State, and we'll see what Michigan is as well and Wisconsin. So I think defenses are the first thing you talk about and how the evolution of defenses go through the end of October and on into November. So that stands out. And then certainly the news today. I mean, now you start to see some cancellations in the SEC. And the SEC's kind of put themselves with their back against the wall, having that one open date on December 12th. Florida and LSU, you hope this thing doesn't linger for them and that they're able to get back on the field next week. And obviously South Carolina goes and plays LSU, but you hope that everybody's able to move forward, not miss days, because I think the worst thing that happens is we're trying to compare, Florida with a 9-game schedule or Alabama with an 8-game schedule, Ohio State with a 7, and Clemson with an 11, just so forth and so on. I think that makes it very difficult for a lot of people at the very end.
And you bring that to mind that the SEC now has 2 cancellations. The Big 12's had a handful, but it should really make the Pac-12 and the Big Ten take notice because they've got no flexibility in their schedule, and they've got the reduced schedules, as you just mentioned, that could be even more so. And they're going to be hoping, I would think, that their prominent matchups are spared. If there's going to be a game cancellation, let it be the Rutgers-Illinois game. let it be the Oregon State Colorado game.
No, you're right about that. I mean, and I think for those programs trying to find a way, and I do like what the Big Ten did. I think that their idea to play that extra weekend, which will essentially be championship weekend, where you'll have 1 versus 1 and 2 versus 2 and so on down the line, obviously. But for 1 versus 1 and 2 versus 2, that gives them an opportunity for us to really judge them. Not that I'm on the playoff committee, but it does give us a chance to judge Ohio State against, say, a Wisconsin or a Minnesota, whoever comes out of that other division. But certainly that's the things that you look at now as we try and narrow it down. I mean, I think you've got to take that into account, the schedule and how many games you play. If not, who cares what anybody's record is? It's an odd year. I can go ahead. You and I can sit down and pick out the 4 best teams right now. It's Ohio State, it's Alabama, it's Clemson, and I don't know, throw a handful of teams in for the 4th spot, and let's just call off the rest of the season and let those teams go play a college football. So, college football playoff. So other than that, to me, you have to have some sort of formula to figure out, hey, this team's played 7 games, but this team's played 9. Well, this team's played 11, and we'll figure that out when we get to mid-December, I reckon.
Yeah, so you lead me right into this. We'll put you on the college football playoff selection committee. In regards to, we've got this season where there have been no significant non-conference games played. If anything, the only significant ones showed that the Big 12 is not that good because they couldn't beat Sun Belt teams. So basically, you've got a neutral situation because everybody's just playing in a silo in their own conference, except, again, the Big 12 has to take a bit of a knock for some of its better teams, losing to Sun Belt teams, and then coming into the conference and beating the Texas and Oklahomas. How would you, where we typically can say, oh, yeah, there was that Auburn-Oregon game, or was Ohio State played this team out of conference, and Oklahoma played that team, and we can start to connect some dots to at least say, well, the Big Ten's looked really good, and the SEC's been phenomenal, or whatever it's been. You have none of that. You just have teams playing against teams in their own conference, but then you got to select the 4 best.
Yeah, I don't know, because a great example is this weekend. Figure out Alabama, Georgia. I'm not impressed with the SEC. I mean, there's good teams. I don't think the league is as strong as it's been. Maybe it's because of that defensive thing. But, look, we know LSU is a shell of itself right now. This is not going to be the LSU program in 2021 or 2022. But everything that they've gone through this year, LSU is a shell of themselves. That might not be a 5-win team right now. Florida goes to Texas A&M. Florida's giving up points left and right. Florida doesn't look like a college football playoff team. What happens if Alabama loses by a field goal without Nick Saban at home to Georgia, and Georgia's still trying to figure everything out with Stetson Bennett, or whether JT Daniels works his way into the mix? If you're going to have a year, and they're not going to do this, but if you put me on the committee, I am banging the table. Let's please, especially with the news today that all teams are eligible for bowl games. All teams, everybody's eligible. Let's go ahead and expand the playoff. Let's get it out to 8. Let's open the door for other teams. Let's not force us into this situation. It won't happen. But that if you put me on the committee, I'd be banging the table for that, because I don't know how you figure it out right now. I don't know how you look at you're going to be able to narrow it down. When I look at the SEC right now, I see Alabama, and I don't see a whole lot behind them. I'm not buying into Georgia until I watch Stetson Bennett have to go against Alabama's defense on Saturday night.
Will Gunter, the all-new early game on 107.5 The Game. Will, we appreciate you stopping by, breaking down the Gamecocks and the rest of the nation for us.
Always appreciate it, man. Y'all take care.
Thanks, Will. And we appreciate our 3 guests thus far. So you got a Georgia-Alabama breakdown from Palmer Toms on Dogs at 247 Sports, Jackie Franchuli from All Gators on SI.com with the Florida cancellation against LSU, and so much to talk about there regarding the Florida loss to Texas A&M and the probable cancellation as it sets up against Missouri. So the Gators might be down 2 games with the rescheduling of the LSU game for December 12th. And then, of course, we just talked to Will Gunter. South Carolina takes on Auburn coming up this weekend. So as we look through the SEC, it's, of course, highlighted by Bama, Georgia in Tuscaloosa. That game is a CBS 8 o'clock Eastern time game. Earlier in the day, the SEC kicks off with Auburn, 15th ranked in the country right now at South Carolina. ESPN game at noon Eastern. Kentucky, Tennessee is going to be a game I'm going to be watching for sure. Kentucky at Tennessee. The Vols coming off the loss to Georgia. Kentucky getting its first win of the season in basically shutout fashion against Mississippi State, and Mike Leach's offense throwing the ball 70 times, completing 45 for no points. That's tough to do. 70 passes, complete 45, 275 yards, no points for Mississippi State with 6 interceptions as KJ Costello was benched. And we've got Ole Miss at Arkansas. That's probably the most intriguing game for teams that are non-contenders this weekend. Ole Miss has played extremely well, took Alabama to the final 5 minutes in a 48-48 game, coming off a game in which they beat Kentucky on the road 42-41. And, of course, Ole Miss put up 35 points and gave Florida all they could handle in the opener, 51-35. So, yeah, I'm liking this Ole Miss-Arkansas matchup at 3:30 Eastern time on the SEC network. And we've got Texas A&M that's got to have some bounce in its step coming off a win over Florida. So A&M 41-38 over the Gators goes to Mississippi State. And the toast of Stark Vegas, Mike Leach, after 600-plus yards against LSU through the air, an SEC record, then loses to Arkansas, loser of 20 consecutive SEC games, and then a loser at Lexington against a Kentucky team that shut them out. So a lot can change in 2 weeks. Mike Leach goes from guru, who just defeated the defending national champion in Death Valley, to a 2-time loser to Arkansas and Kentucky. All right. Georgia, Alabama, of course. Missouri, Vandy canceled, not getting as much pub as the other cancellation, LSU and Florida. We will be on here to take your phone calls, and also we've got other guests coming on, I believe. We had them lined up earlier, so we shall see what's coming up as we approach 9 o'clock, so we'll stay on for a while. All right, let's go to the rankings, because I had seen these rankings, and my deal is that the rankings don't make sense. That's why I had to come up with the top 25 that actually makes sense. Check out the video from last week. You will probably raise an eyebrow or two, if that's possible. I don't know if anyone can do that. I can't do that. Both eyebrows. I can only do the left. So we already have some issues with the poll. So the top 25 AP poll: Clemson 1, Alabama 2, Georgia 3, Notre Dame 4, North Carolina 5, Ohio State 6, Oklahoma State 7, Cincinnati 8, Penn State 9, Florida 10. Okay, issue. Okay. We play these games. I believe that there's an assumption when two teams play that the team that wins the game has earned something by winning the game, that they actually go on the field and play a football game to decide who's better at football. Now, I know that I often say the better team does not always win, but I wait until that's proven out throughout the season. So when 6-6 Purdue beats 11-1 Ohio State, we can credit Purdue with being the better team on that night, but we clearly know that they're not the better team because they play in the same conference against light competition, and Ohio State was much better for the season. But we've played 4 games. Check that. 3 games in the SEC. Texas A&M is 2-1. Florida is 2-1. Texas A&M also played what is most likely the best team, or the second best team in the conference, Alabama. And that's Texas A&M's loss. And Texas A&M beat Florida head-to-head. And they're ranked behind Florida. So in the coaches poll, it's Florida 9, Texas A&M 11. In the AP Top 25, it's Florida 10 and Texas A&M 11. Idiotic. That is complete idiocy, incompetence, stupidity, whatever tag you want to put on it. It makes no sense to rank a team ahead of another team that they beat. You don't rank the team that lost the game higher unless, again, the record's better. It's proven over the course of the season. Georgia went 10-2 last year. They went 11-1 last year. They lost to South Carolina. South Carolina was 4-8. Of course, South Carolina is not going to be ranked ahead of Georgia, but that's 11-1 versus 4-8. This is 2-1 against 2-1. Okay. First issue I have with the poll. Oregon is number 12 in the AP. Miami 13, BYU 14. BYU is going to be difficult to rank the rest of the year because they play nobody. Auburn is 15. Wisconsin 16. SMU 17. Tennessee is 18. Michigan 19. Iowa State 20. Louisiana 21. This could be an issue right here. So it's almost like the AP is trying to show us how stupid they are. It's trying to magnify the stupidity by ranking the teams right next to each other. Not only do they have Florida ranked ahead of Texas A&M, 10 versus 11, they also have Iowa State ranked ahead of Louisiana. Louisiana beat Iowa State in Ames by 17 points. And they're 3-0, and Iowa State's 3-1. Has Iowa State played better teams in those other games? Yes. 31-14. You're ranking a team ahead of another team that lost 31-14, and they've got a worse record. I've got to shoot a video about this. I just feel it coming. Kansas State at number 22, Virginia Tech 23, Minnesota 24, and USC is number 25. So I hate to see the teams that haven't played ranked, but that'll work itself out, and it's going to be an interesting comparison once we dive into Pac-12 and Big Ten play, because those teams are going to have 2 games played, when some teams in the SEC will have, oh my goodness, they already have 3. They'll have 2 more. That's 5. When the Big Ten has 2 games played, the SEC will have 5 played in that range, and the ACC and the Big 12 more. We talked Minnesota football with Daniel House from Gopher Guru, and we posted that video today. Excellent conversation on PJ Fleck and the boys from Minneapolis. We have 2 separate Nebraska videos coming out soon, as well as Miami, of course. Some Miami live streams. Our Ohio State live stream is coming up on Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Let's see. We get a question coming in from Anthony James. Who's your dark horse in the Big Ten? Well, Anthony, I would ask you to define a dark horse, but I'll play along because for everyone it's a little bit different. So I'm going to go on a dark horse in the Big Ten to be the, I like Purdue. I like Minnesota. I don't know if you consider them to be dark horses or not. Minnesota, I consider them coming off their season a bit of a favorite there in the Big Ten Western Division. But Purdue, I like. And if Nebraska didn't have such a difficult schedule, I'd go with the Huskers. But they most likely have the most difficult schedule in the Big Ten with the Western Division, plus Penn State and Ohio State. All right, we will continue with our SEC discussion. Look at this. We got Kevin McGuffey on the line from Last Word on College Football. Looks like Kevin might be working out some issues, some audio and so forth. Kevin, you with us?
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Cool.
How you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I have a new little setup here, so I'm trying these headphones to see if they work. But yeah, thanks for having me. And I have to say, it's just great to have you back on. Been missing it. missing the college football chat, not just us talking, but just in general. And it's just really great to have you back.
They had me shut down for 28 days, but we got it back. So here we are, and we're going full throttle all the time. So it should be quite a ride. So
and
people
I agree.
will probably get sick of me, but I'm going to be here.
Nebraska is the dark horse in the Big Ten. I could see that. So we'll see. They got to get that. Got to get to that first game first, but.
Yeah, it could improve from there if things play out the way we expect. But certainly the Kentucky situation, not exactly what you had hoped for to start the season, but they at least got the win, of course, in dominant fashion against Mississippi State. So that first week was difficult, considering that at one point in the fourth quarter it was 15-13. Had the ball in midfield, and there was a turnover there in the fourth quarter that was costly. And of course, if we go all the way back to the end of the first half, a situation in which we all thought Kentucky scored, because I think when the football's entirely in the end zone, plus maybe even like a shoulder and an elbow, and that you usually give that guy the touchdown, I think. So that was pretty unfortunate with the interception on the next play, and it's a difficult defeat at Auburn. And then, of course, the missed extra point the next week in overtime set you up for what had to be a good feeling for Kentucky fans and for the team to play a dominant game and get that first win.
Yeah, definitely. As you said, the season hasn't gone quite as many of us in the media hope that it would, but 1-2 is better than 0-3. As you said, the game against Auburn, you had the obvious to everyone but the officials and the replay officials touchdown from AJ Rose, and then as you said, the next play, the interception, and then Kentucky just kind of killed themselves with turnovers after that. The rest of that game. And then you go to the next week against Ole Miss, the secondary that was supposed to be the highlight of the season, the highlight of the defense, just got torched basically in the first 2 weeks by Auburn and Ole Miss. And then out of nowhere, last weekend, you have the Kentucky, that same secondary that in one game went from last in the nation in turnover margin and interceptions to being in the top 10 when they picked off, KJ Costello and Mississippi State 6 times. And as you alluded to, it's that 24-2 win. It really should have been 24-0. It was the first time that a Mike Leach coach team had ever been basically shut out. Did not score an offensive point. It was just the 2 points on one of the most bizarre safeties that you will ever see, where Kentucky had the ball close to midfield and the center snapped the ball over Max Duffy's head, and so. And he did the smart thing. He just kind of ran towards the ball and just kicked it out of the end zone and took the safety, because at that point it was still only about a 10-point game and 10-12-point game. But then, as you said, now hopefully the way they played last week is the way the defense will play the rest of the season. And on the flip side, the first 2 games, Kentucky averaged 470 yards in total offense, and against Mississippi State they had 157, but yet they won 24-2. So it's 2020 is just a bizarre year anyway, and so this first 3 games has been kind of bizarre as well for the Cats, but hopefully they can build on that game this past week. And now they're heading to I'm finishing before we got on here, was finishing up writing up my preview for the Last Word on College Football for the Tennessee game, and obviously it's a place where Kentucky's not had a lot of success over the last 40, however many years you want to go back. I kept going back farther and farther. Obviously, they've lost 17 in a row in Knoxville. The last win in Knoxville was 1984. And, they're hoping, Coach Stoops has said that they may try to do some different, even like go to the game a different way, go do something to try to break the streak. So we'll see what happens on Saturday, and fingers crossed, everything seems to be a go for this one. So.
Kevin McGuffey joins us from Last Word on College Football. Kentucky at 1-2 after a 24-2 win against Mike Leach's passing offense with 6 interceptions in that game. Of course, Leach and company threw it 70 times. Terry Wilson's thrown it 75 times this year.
Yeah, basically. You know, he's as you well know, I think most of the listeners, viewers know, you know, he tore his patellar tendon last year in the second game, was out for the rest of the season. Of course, there was no spring practice, and he's kind of, you know, by all intents and purposes and practices, everybody, you know, said he looks good. He was throwing the ball good. And for the most part, he played pretty well at Auburn. Just, you know, the old bugaboo turnovers, which has always been a thing with him previously. But, and like I said, then you know, he just, the whole offense just looked out of sync on Saturday for whatever reason. You know, the running game didn't click. The passing game, as you said, if you tell me Kentucky was going to get 157 total yards and beat Mississippi State by 20, I would say you're crazy. But then I also say I'll take it. So, but hopefully this is a learning experience. You know, he's hopefully getting more and more comfortable. I mean, it's the fourth game now, so we'll see what happens. And you know, there's you know, you have Joey Gatewood out there. You know, you have the internet coaches that or the Twitter coaches, whatever you want to call them. They're saying play Joey Gatewood, you know. And he went in and late in the fourth quarter, I think, and ran a couple of series. But you know, Terry Wilson, I think, is still obviously the quarterback until otherwise, you know, something were to happen. You know, hopefully nothing obviously will happen, but you know what I mean. So
You have this bevy of running backs that we talked about a few times during the offseason, and Terry Wilson still leads the team in rushing with 221 yards. The offensive line was certainly projected to be one of the best in the nation, not just the SEC. Do we feel good about the running game, and has the offensive line been as dominant as expected?
I still feel good about it. Now you have to take Cavassier Smoke, who was, you know, they have the three-headed monster they like to call, with AJ Rose and Christopher Rodriguez and Cavassier Smoke. Now Smoke is out for a few weeks with broken ribs, like rib injury. It happened during the Mississippi State, no, excuse me, during the Ole Miss game, and so they're not expecting him back for a couple more weeks. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to put you know, as I said, they just look a little out of sync for whatever reason. I mean, the offensive line is still doing still doing good. It's just, you know, like I said, they did well, you know, running against Auburn and Ole Miss. And, you know, Mississippi State does have, I think, was one of the top 10 rushing defenses. So maybe, you know, well, I'll give them some credit. Maybe that had something to do with it. But I don't know. It's like it just hasn't come together yet. And hopefully, maybe this Mississippi State game will be the start of it. But no, I still feel good about the running game, and I feel good, you know, to use a line from Coach Cal. He always says, "I like my team." I mean, I like the team. I just, you know, it's just really tough this year, and I'm sure everyone you talk to says that, playing that all SEC schedule, because you know normally Kentucky would have had Eastern Michigan, Toledo, Eastern Illinois, you know, to get those, you know, to kind of get those kinks out and get everything worked out. And, you know, you're jumping right in this year, you know, Auburn and then Ole Miss, Mississippi State. And then now you have Tennessee this week and Georgia next week. So, you know, there's no breaks this year. There's no off weeks, no, you know, let's rest some guys and play some of our second stringers. So
I tried to remind people of that, or at least enlighten them to that, when they got all over me during my preseason predictions and going game by game, because if you take away the typical one or two FCS games or group of five games, and then usually in Kentucky's case, they'll play Louisville, and they have been winning that game, but consider that their most difficult non-conference game. Then they'll play the MAC and the FCS games, the group of five, Conference USA, and they're likely to go 3-1 or 4-0 in the non-conference season. But you expand the SEC schedule to 10, from 8 to 10, you wipe out all those automatic wins, and you put the whole league together. The records aren't going to look as glossy and nice as they typically are, because you typically have all these 5-3 teams in the SEC. They're able to pad on another 4 wins, and they become 9-3 teams. Well, that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And you know, back before the original schedules, you know, when the original schedules came out, I had Kentucky going somewhere around 9-3, and obviously winning those 4 games plus, I had them going 5-3 in the conference, which may have been a stretch, but I think 4-4, I think 8-4, 9-3 could have been a good number this year. Now, my preseason pick that I did for Last Word, I went a little more positive than some people did, I think, and I can't remember if you said I had them going 6-4. I can't remember if you had 6-4 or 5. I don't remember.
We'll get to that in just a second, Kevin.
Okay, but as you said, that losing, especially somebody, a school like Kentucky and some of these others, they count on those 3 to 4 wins every year to get you to that 6-win, 7-win, where you're basically playing later in the season for a destination, a bowl destination, as opposed to, like the Birmingham Bowl. Nothing against the Birmingham Bowl, but trying to step up farther and farther to get, like to the Gator Bowl. I think that's where I had Kentucky going this year. So originally, but I've been doing bowl predictions for Last Word. Right now I have them playing in the Liberty Bowl. So, which is not, Memphis is not bad.
Yeah, it's a pretty quick trip there from Lexington to Memphis. Not too bad. But at 1-2, 6-4 sounds pretty reasonable. Kevin, there were people out there, I understand, that actually picked Kentucky to go to the SEC championship game.
That wasn't me, but yeah, I'm sure there probably was. But yeah, that's right. I forgot about it. See, I remember now. Yeah, I remember that now. You're right. How could I forget that? Sorry about that. But yeah, I said, it's the whole schedule thing. Honestly, I really thought they were going to beat Auburn. The whole year, all total confidence. I was like, they're going to go down there, they're going to beat Auburn, and they're going to start 3-0, and then we'll see what happens with Georgia and Tennessee. But obviously, that hasn't happened. Now, should they be able to beat Tennessee this week? I think 6 wins would still be doable, because I think they can beat Vandy, they can beat Missouri, and I think they can beat South Carolina. Now, Florida, who knows? As you said, who knows what's going on with Florida right now? And then they got Alabama added on to the schedule this year. So, like I said, 6-4, it can still be done, but they have to win this Saturday.
All right. Yeah, it's starting to play into the typical Georgia dominance, followed by Florida and then everybody else in the SEC Eastern Division, unless something drastically changes. But for that noon Eastern time window, that's the game I want to see. Kentucky taking on Tennessee in Knoxville. Should be a good one. Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football joining us. Kevin, we appreciate you stopping by. Want everyone to head on over to Last Word on College Football.
Yes, sir. Last Word on College Football. Check it out. They've kind of redesigned the website, and there's a lot of great content on there. We probably follow, I think, 25, 30 teams now. Some people who had followed, who were, did other teams like big in the Big Ten and Pac-12, had started writing about other teams, when the pandemic hit and everybody canceled their seasons. And so now we're getting, some bonus content that you weren't having before. And then we have, like I said, I have a bowl prediction thing. I do projections I do every week. Jason Ray does a Heisman Trophy ballot every week. That's always really, really fun, really interesting. And please check it out. And Last Word on CFB on Twitter. And check it out. I think everyone will really like it if you head over there.
Appreciate that, Kevin. Enjoy the game.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And once again, thank you for having me on. And it's great to have you back, and great to be talking to you again.
Thanks, Kevin. We'll see you soon. Kentucky, Tennessee. That game should be played, as far as we know right now. One game that will not be played. Of course, the breaking news today in the SEC, Florida and LSU will not hit the field coming up this Saturday because of COVID concerns and positive tests. At Florida, we got Lon Phillips Sullivan on the line. You can join him on LSU Odyssey.
How's it going?
It's going pretty well. How are you, sir?
It's been a weird 3 games, hasn't it, Mark?
Well, it's been a weird 3 games going on 4 games now, or not a 4th game, but a 4th week that's even weirder than the first 3. So how can you explain that? We have you on here to bring some some perspective to all this mess that includes losses to Missouri, 600 plus yards given up through the air to KJ Costello, and now, of course, unfortunately, no game coming up this week.
It's just shocking. I mean, we've gone from being one of the most unlucky teams. Derek Stingley the night before the game, all these just mountains of opt-outs, even injuries, suspensions, a lot of self-caused, a lot of shooting ourselves in the foot, so to speak. And then we go to being extremely lucky, I feel, to having this game postponed. Miles Brennan with a left shoulder injury, he was doubtful after he looked fantastic going on for, I think, the third straight game. Only one real bad pick of consequence, only 5 yards off of Joe Burrow's 2019 totals through first 3 games against vastly better competition. Same number of touchdowns as Burrow. The 2 picks, and he has 2 more picks than Joe Burrow had at the time, but as we saw against Mississippi State, one of those was from his elbow being hit right when he's about to hit Racey McMouth wide open for a touchdown, which could have changed that game. And the Missouri interception was really bad, but other than that, Miles Brennan has looked fantastic. He's delivered, I think, actually more than the hype of which we gave him. But the defense, I was on your show nonstop hyping this defense, and we felt that Bo Pelini was the perfect hire. We felt it was, not just Pelini, what he would bring, but already the assistants who were there. And I'm not ready to give up on Pelini just yet. I'm not as part of the, fire Pelini right now movement, but Pelini has to show me some changes. He has to show me that he can evolve. There were hardly any rotations along the linebacker front. You just had Damone Clark, Jabril Cox out there the entire game. They were huffing and puffing. That's why they couldn't keep up with the crossing routes. It was just missed assignments, blown coverages left and right. It was not an LSU defense, but more than anything, if the defense is supposed to be like their defensive coordinator, they're supposed to take on the identity of that coordinator. That was not a Bo Pelini defense. We're supposed to see the fire, the passion, give up a lot of points, give up a lot of yards, whatever. We've seen it in the past with Pelini's defenses, but there was always this passion, this extremity, this intensity that won us the game. And that was lacking big time against Mississippi State and Missouri. And we just got by against Vanderbilt because Vanderbilt are utter crap. But against Mississippi State, it was shocking. The profligate defense in the coverage. It was horrible. And then against Missouri, I mean, Connor Razalik, that is just unacceptable. That is not – Missouri doing that 45-41. And yet still, with saying all of that, LSU actually had a chance to win all 3 games. We won the turnover battle. We're actually leading the SEC in turnover margin, 3rd in the nation in turnover margin, forced and recovered 5 fumbles, 3 interceptions, defensive touchdown, tons and tons of pressures and sacks. But we could not duplicate that pressure for a 3rd game against Missouri. Besides the Ojulari strip sack, we couldn't see it. That guy he sat back there and just destroyed us, just ripped us to shreds. And you can't put it on the players. Here's the thing. What I saw out there was miscommunications leading to these errors. That's completely on the coaches, completely 100%. If Pelini doesn't get this straight, he could be out of a job after one season back at LSU. And that would be a sad thing to see, but hey, that was not an LSU defense. That was inexcusable. It has to get better. Losing to Mississippi State, Missouri, before we've even played Florida, 2 losses are on the board. Our path to the CFP, I think it's still there, just by a shred of a doubt. Just by a shred of a chance. We will have to beat Alabama. They'll have to lose to Georgia. Then, maybe we have to beat a 1-loss Georgia team in the SEC title game to get in. It will have to take 2020 craziness for it to happen. But it's 2020. Why not? Miles Brennan, he's good enough to deliver that. But concerning the Florida game, I am very, very pleased to see the postponement, to be honest, with some of the injuries, some of the personnel changes that Coach Orgeron alluded to that were coming in the days to come. And, of course, not having a starting quarterback, having some freshmen out there against Florida, Kyle Trask and that number 10 angry Florida Gators team who are going to be wanting to avenge that A&M loss. I really didn't like our chances.
LSU Florida canceled. The game has been rescheduled tentatively, of course, for December 12th. That is the week before the SEC championship game, one that LSU won over Georgia last year, but they've got a whole lot of work to do after losing to Mizzou and against a Mississippi State, a schedule that we looked at preseason and thought, okay, the Alabamas and the Auburns and the Floridas come later, and of course Texas A&M as well, and LSU will be able to break in all that young, inexperienced talent against the likes of Mississippi State, Vandy, and Missouri, but here they sit at 1-2. So you talk about the transition from Dave Aranda, who apparently took that defense with him to Waco, and Bo Pelini. Are they talking about effort? Are they talking about scheme issues? Or they talk what seems to be getting most of the blame here?
What we're hearing that the team has actually been working on the last few days in practice, and actually since the Mississippi State debacle, they've been trying to work on all of that. It's a little bit of everything. It's effort, it's scheme, it's personnel. We're not usually using the right rotations. We're not pulling people out of the game at the right time. We're not using the right mix, a combination of players. I feel like, just for instance, Apu Ika and Jaquelin Roy, my bad. Jaquelin Roy and Siaki Ika, those two together would be absolutely devastating in the middle, and we never saw those two used, ever. Jaquelin Roy absolutely ran the Vanderbilt game as a freshman. B.J. Ojolari coming off the edge and Ali Guy, we hardly saw that tandem. We only just saw Ali Guy, and there was times he was even a defensive tackle. But we're not just really, the point of emphasis has to be the linebacking crew. I mean, that was supposed to be something that was a big worrying sign, but then once Devontae Lee was switched over from receiver, once we got Jabril Cox in a transfer portal, once Damone Clark was given the number 18, and more people came to know of his improved ability, especially last year. He had 50 tackles off the bench and he played in every game when we won the national title. Massive experience, massive talent, but for some weird reason they're just taking the wrong angles on tackles. Just they're almost gassed when they get there. I think it has to do with conditioning. I think it has to do with effort and practice, and the buck stops with Coach Orgeron. He understands that. And I feel that we've heard that his best coaching performance was actually this last week. What we heard, what he's been able to translate to the team, what he's been able to get, or what response he's been able to get from the players. We still have to see that on the field, of course. I mean, I can't sit here and make excuses and pound my chest about 2019 anymore. The future is now. And Coach Orgeron has to prove to everybody right now. He doesn't have to prove it to me. He doesn't have to prove it to LSU fans. But he has to prove it to people right now who are questioning whether he is the coach who can actually challenge Saban in the SEC, who can actually bring LSU and that national brand, not beyond a national brand, but to national title, contention every single season, whether we're losing people to the draft or not, whether we have injuries or suspensions, or whether we're losing a big quarterback or a running back or not. And I don't know.
Yeah, certainly a rough start at 1-2, unexpected. Many people expected a decline with all the NFL talent departing. I don't think we would count you as one of them, Lon. You were certainly optimistic, and that's understandable with so much 4- and 5-star talent on the roster. But again, 1-2 against teams that they were heavily favored against. So looking forward, who are some of those players that you've seen here in the first few weeks that we wouldn't necessarily be that familiar with, considering that we only had 2 or 3 starters back on offense and defense that have stood out to you?
Oh, of course, Ali Gay. I mean, beginning with big number 11. I mean, I really feel he could opt out right now and have a chance at being at least a second, third round pick. 6'6", 255, 3 pass deflections against Mississippi State. He should have caught that and took it to the house on one of them. His pressures and sacks and his influence has kind of slowed down, especially in the game against Missouri. But Ali Gay was 10 out of 10. I mean, incredible, affecting the game at will, creating turnovers. He had a fumble recovery against Missouri, so he wasn't completely ineffective. BJ Ojolari had a strip sack. I've been repping this guy. Did an interview with him on our site, lsuodyssey.com. He's been fantastic. I really think he needs to see the field more. Jaquelin Roy at defensive tackle. That's someone who absolutely took over the Vanderbilt game, which was his, big coming out party. He didn't really play much against Mississippi State, but he came in and just absolutely controlled against Vanderbilt. And I really think he's an absolute monster. We got to see him play. Eli Ricks, 2 interceptions. There were some blown coverages, but at the same time, I won't put that on Eli. He's a freshman. He's been thrown right into the fire, and 2 interceptions, one of which could have completely changed the game against Mississippi State. I have to put him on the list. He's been incredible. Also, Miles Brennan, I mean, you can't say enough about his performance, how gutty he was. I mean, he could barely even throw the football, and here he was, goes out there, slings it around for 435 yards. 2 plays after he injured his shoulder, he threw a touchdown to Terrace Marshall as he's rolling to his right, gets hit on that left shoulder again as he's driven into the ground, hangs in there, makes a brilliant throw. He hung in there. He has LSU fans' ultimate respect. If they were doubting him after week 1, if they were sighing after his week 2 performance, well, they were cheering at his week 3 triumph. They were all in after what he accomplished against Missouri, and even it's just sad that it was in defeat. The other thing is he was 0 for 11 on third down. We have to get that together. 9 for 40 in 3 games. He's got to clean that up. I feel he's going to. I feel like Miles Brennan is a huge strength of this team. Him and Terrace Marshall are basically carrying this team. Terrace Marshall, 11 catches, 235 yards, 3 touchdowns, 21 yards per catch, 75-yard long bomb. He has 17 red zone touchdown catches out of his 20 touchdown catches total in his LSU career. He is a red zone assassin, but more than that, he's proven he can take it to the house from long. Terrace Marshall, he's just made himself a first-round draft pick.
After giving up more points than at any point through 3 games in LSU history, the Tigers, of course, won't be on the field this Saturday. That game's been canceled against Florida. We expect them to be back at it in Death Valley against South Carolina, October 24th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time start. Lon Philip Sullivan from LSU Odyssey. We invite everyone to join him and all that they've got going on over there in tracking the defending national champions. Lon, we appreciate you stopping by. Enjoy some other football, I guess, this weekend and get ready for those Gamecocks.
Please, Georgia, whoop up on Alabama. Go Tigers. Everybody subscribe, lsuodyssey.com. We got some great interviews. Ty Davis Price interview, Ojolari interview. We've got it all coming. Go Tigers, baby. Thank you, Mark.
And again, the LSU Tigers and Florida Gators canceled. We talked to that off the top of the show. We've got Stephen M. Smith on the line from Touchdown Alabama. I've got to dial him up. He's not able to join us via video, so we'll get Stephen on the line here. And Stephen joins us on a regular basis. Let's call him on up to get the Alabama take on the big matchup against Georgia. Because, of course, we heard from Palmer Toms on Dogs 247 Sports. Stephen, you're on the line here. We appreciate you stopping by.
Absolutely.
Again, Stephen M. Smith of TouchdownAlabama.com. Please join him right there. Stephen, we heard the Georgia side. Would love to get your take on the big matchup coming up in Tuscaloosa. And, of course, I'm going to go to the big trouble spot. That looked like a flag football game in Oxford last Saturday night.
It was the most weirdest, unconventional. Did not expect the performance there, in that game for Alabama against Ole Miss. Giving up 48 points in that matchup, giving up 647 yards in that matchup. I know for a fact that Coach Saban I know for a fact that Coach Saban was not happy with it. The players were not happy with it, especially this coming against an unranked team like Ole Miss. Now, granted, Lane Kiffin, one of the better offensive minds in college football, but at the same time, Coach Saban demands perfection. He expects perfection from this team, and I remember just seeing the guys, walk off the field after the game. They were upset. They were disgruntled. They were highly bothered. So I look at this matchup, especially this week in practice. There's been a much better focus. There's been a much better attention to detail this week, a much better energy. So I'm excited to see, how this translates here on the field. Now, of course, the difference between Ole Miss and Georgia stylistically, Ole Miss kind of runs that hurry-up tempo style. Georgia's more of a true pro-style offense with running the football and play action. But it's gonna be a fun matchup.
I went back 2 years and looked at the Ole Miss game there in Oxford, and certainly personnel change. Lane Kiffin wasn't the Ole Miss head coach, and he's one of the best in the business in providing those matchup issues for the defense. But DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown at wide receiver, of course, you remember the game well. They hit you up for a 75-yard touchdown in the game's opening play, and then, bam, that was it. The Bama defense clamped down after that. And this trending is, again, we don't want to overplay one game because the effort against Missouri, considering what they just put together against LSU, certainly wasn't bad at all because there was only 3 points on the board for Mizzou during meaningful minutes. And then the Texas A&M score was pretty much what we thought it would be, and they did a nice job against the Aggies. But is there any way to conceive what happened against Ole Miss, not just in the passing game, but there were runs right up the middle where it just looked like everybody vacated the center of the field, and Ole Miss was chewing up yardage both on the ground and through the air.
Some of it, Mark, was not having the right personnel on the field. At times, not having the guys that are responsible for doing those jobs. And I think that there are moments where Alabama players at times are asked to do a whole bunch of things instead of just simplifying that game plan and allowing those guys to just be able to make plays that were just a simplified game plan. So some of it was not having the right personnel in the field, most definitely, but also not getting that consistent push. I mean, you saw in the game where you have guys like LeBron Ray, DJ Dale, Christian Barmore, all guys of superstar potential, but are not getting that push they need to get. And on top of that, just missed tackles. There were moments where guys were getting to the backfield. They were knifing their way in the backfield. And I know the field was wet. I understand that. But when you have a guy by the ankle, by the jersey, when you have some leverage on an opposing player, you got to be able to finish the play. And there were a lot of times where Alabama would have Matt Corral, couldn't finish the tackle, or it would have Snoop Connor or have Jerrion Ely and just could not finish the tackle. So fundamental tackling, I counted 38 missed tackles in the matchup, and that is unlike an Alabama defense to have. So that right there has got to get fixed, but also having the right personnel on the field, playing the guys that are going to be able to execute those roles. Both of those two things have to be done.
The big news in the SEC came down earlier today that LSU and Florida canceled because of too many positive COVID tests coming out of the Florida facility. And then even bigger news came out a couple hours later when it was announced that Nick Saban had tested positive for COVID. We've discussed that on here and went live early to address those two situations. Is there anything else that you can provide in regards to Nick Saban's situation? I'm understanding that his test was confirmed. He took a second test. Do we know who's going to be on the sideline and in charge? My guess would be Steve Sarkisian.
That is the guy. Steve Sarkisian has been appointed as the point person by Coach Saban as he is running the operation of practice, running the operation at the program as we speak, while Coach Saban is running things remotely from home. Like you mentioned, Mark, Coach Saban had 2 different PCR tests, which are done by the medical staff here at the university. He got the news back at 1 p.m. today that it was a positive test. He immediately alerted the team, the players, and the coaching staff on Zoom, and then he went home to kind of isolate himself. The 2 things that he's been the most concerned about, number one, is not spreading anything to any members of his immediate family. Although he is asymptomatic, he's not showing any symptoms, does not want to spread anything to members of the immediate family. But then also, of course, of that, he just wants to make sure that the players are still focused, still high energy, still locked in, still lasered onto the job that they have to do. Now, of course, he lightly chuckled and said, just because I'm at home does not mean I fled the country. I'm still watching practices on Zoom. I'm still communicating with coaches, with players, with team managers. So I'm still seeing, what's going on. I'm just not out there presently right now due to this situation. So Saban is researching right now, trying to find a way to still possibly be out here for this matchup against Georgia. But if he cannot go, then he's already appointed Steve Sarkisian as the point person to run the operation for this game.
The ball's barely hitting the grass once it comes out of the hands of Mac Jones. He's just a tick under 80% completion percentage, coming off a tremendous game against Ole Miss at 28 of 32. He's got a tremendous yards per attempt, yards per completion percentage because of the stretching the field and, of course, the run after the catch ability of those tremendous wide receivers. Jalen Waddle having a great season, over 120 yards in each game thus far. And back to Jones, 8 touchdowns and 1 pick. Can you compare what we've seen out of this Alabama offense through 3 games with some of these great historic Alabama passing attacks under Tua here in 2018 and 19?
It's unreal, Mark. It is unreal. And what's crazy is I've been on your show countless times talking about for the last 2 to 3 years how dynamic Mac Jones can really truly be. And I remember just going back to the 2017 year when he came in as a freshman. He was working scout team for that offense, and he was throwing deep passes to Terrell Shavers then. Shavers, of course, now a wide receiver for Mississippi State. But at that time, Mac Jones was throwing deep passes to Terrell Shavers, and Nick Saban at one point stopped the practice, looked at Mac Jones and said, "Stop throwing him the ball deep all the time." Mac Jones lasers his head coach in the face and goes, "Well, if you want me to stop, tell your defense to check me then." And everybody at that practice was going, "Who has all of this mouth coming at Nick Saban?" And they found out it was Mac Jones, and people were like, "Whoa, it's this dude." And at that moment, I knew right then this dude is something to deal with. I mean, he came from a high school, the Bowles School in Jacksonville, Florida, under the late, great Corky Rogers, which Mac Jones, led those high school teams to multiple, Class 4A state championships. So the ability has always been there. 2 days before this season started, I spoke to 3 of Jones's quarterback coaches in Florida. They all said, this guy has got the potential to have a Joe Burrow type of season. Now, Burrow has already did the big thing, but Jones has some tendencies that Burrow had, last year, at LSU, and we're seeing this. Last season, when Tua got hurt, we saw Mac Jones win the game, and he had some early nerves, but against Arkansas, he played very well. Against Auburn, he went up against one of the best defensive fronts in college football, if not one of the best, and took some hits in that game. Yes, he had the 2 mistakes, but he still threw for 335 passing yards and 4 touchdowns against guys in that defensive front that got drafted. Derrick Brown got drafted to the Panthers first round. Marlon Davidson got drafted by the Atlanta Falcons. They had guys from that front get drafted for Auburn. And then against Michigan in the Citrus Bowl, 16 for 25 passing, 327 yards and 3 touchdowns against a defensive front that had the likes of Aiden Hutchinson, Josh Uche, among other guys, make it to the NFL. So last year he grew in a lot of confidence, and so far this season, I mean, you got to give Steve Sarkisian a lot of credit for putting him in situations to be successful. But this team looks at Mac Jones the same way they look at Tua. The young man is locked in. He's playing incredible football. You know, I'm not shocked right now by how he's doing, because he is constantly perfecting himself and constantly studying film and getting himself better.
Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama joining us to break down the Tide with the enormous matchup coming Saturday night in Tuscaloosa against the Georgia Bulldogs that are playing lights out defense. And of course, the news coming out that Nick Saban has tested positive for COVID. Stephen, you give us as good a player profiles as anybody around. I would like to hear some background on, you know, with the two tremendous wide receivers that moved on to the NFL this past recruiting class, and then with Waddle and Smith, and everybody knows about their exploits. Waddle's just having an All-America type season, and Devonta Smith was a star a few years ago. John Mechie, am I pronouncing his last name correct? What can you tell us about him?
Now, some people call him Michi. I call him Mechie. He prefers both, kind of a quiet, laid-back guy. But Mechie's an interesting story. He came in the 2019 class, a 4-star from Brampton, Canada, but played his high school ball in the Maryland area. And the guy's a flat stud. The guy's a stud, 6 feet, 195 pounds. When you watch him, I basically call him the Canadian twin of Calvin Ridley, because the body type is right there with Calvin. The hands are there. The route running is definitely getting there. This is a guy that works tremendously hard. He and Mac Jones spent a lot of time together in the offseason over the summer in Jacksonville, working on routes, working on timing, working on chemistry, those types of things. Jones and Mechie had 2 really good A-Day game performances prior to COVID coming in, 2018 and 2019. 2018, if you remember, Mark, I think it was Mac Jones was actually the MVP of the A-Day game in 2018, and then 2019, John Mechie was the MVP of the spring game. So these two know each other very well. They work off each other very well. He introduced himself to the college football world against A&M, 5 catches, 181 yards, 2 touchdowns, played well against Ole Miss last week, 4 catches for 75 yards. And according to Devonta Smith, I got a chance to talk to him on Tuesday in the Zoom call, player interviews, and he just lit up talking about Mechie. This young man has worked so hard to get that 3rd wide receiver spot on the starting roster, and he got it in fall camp, worked his tail off, fending off a talent in Javon Baker, the freshman from Georgia, and also Slade Bolden as well. And the team really loves what Mechie can do. Nick Saban really likes the work ethic that this young man has. He's pushed himself to this opportunity. And, like I said, Mark, the hands there, the speed there, the body type there, the route running coming into frame. This is a program that continues to just pump out receivers, and John Mechie's the next one in line.
Folks, digest these numbers. 11 catches, 298 yards. I'll do the math for you. 27.1 yards per catch. We don't expect him to keep up that pace, but that's just phenomenal. Stephen M. Smith of TouchdownAlabama.com breaking down the Tide as they face the Georgia Bulldogs coming up on Saturday night. Stephen, before you go, would love for you to let everyone know where they can find you and your call-in show in particular. That's an outstanding work by you and everybody there on the staff. It's a whole lot of fun. And of course, you talk hardcore college football.
Absolutely, Mark. The people can always find me on Twitter. That's at Coaching M. Smith on Twitter, at Coaching M. Smith on Twitter, or on Facebook. Of course, I am Stephen M. Smith on Facebook, Stephen M. Smith. Beside his Touchdown Alabama magazine, that's on Facebook, Touchdown Alabama magazine. It's also on Twitter at TD Alabama Mag. Beside itself, touchdownalabama.com. where we are breaking down the Crimson Tide from all sorts of angles. Of course, the big news came up today on Coach Saban, so we are literally flying stories out of the bakery right now as we speak with the site touchdownalabama.com.
Well, certainly, Stephen, with all that's going on surrounding Alabama football and the big news today, I would have certainly let you off the hook if you weren't able to join us. But I'm so glad that you found the time. So we appreciate it.
Absolutely, Mark. I enjoy doing this, man. This is fun.
All right, Steve. You have a great time at the ball game. It should be one for the ages.
Absolutely. You take care, Mark.
Our man Stephen M. Smith of touchdownalabama.com tracking the Tide as they take on the Bulldogs of Georgia. Just to let you know what we've got in store. These are my notes on Georgia and Alabama defensively. I have much to say about Alabama's defense and the fixes and Georgia's prominence and the work that they've done through 3 games that has been phenomenal, much unlike anything that we've seen in 2020. What Georgia's done defensively. It's amazing. I want all of you to know what we've got going. We're on Patreon. You get my college football predictions every week. I'm 33-25 against the spread. That will make you money. Head on over to Patreon. You get my predictions. You get exclusive live streams. And for everybody that's watching me right now that's joined us on Patreon, and many of you did when I was in sabbatical, when I was put in lockdown for 28 days. I thank you so much for supporting me. And now we will prove that the Patreon platform is valid. We need to stay there. We need to continue to deliver there, and we will. All right. Also, in addition to my breakdown on Bama and Georgia, man, I got so much. I was taking notes and determining those teams that I felt are on stock market watch, the high risers and the teams in decline over the last several weeks in college football. So, got our stock market watch. We're talking Nebraska football with a few different outlets. Those videos will be coming out soon. Oh my goodness, what else? We got 2 separate Miami live streams coming up tomorrow. And Miami detractors, I know what you're going to say to me, too much Miami football talk, but we've got quality guests. And what I would like to do here as well, in addition to this SEC Live, is I think the next endeavor, if I can find quality Michigan guests, Michigan beat writers, and the like. Of course, I join Steve Deace every Tuesday on Michigan Podcast. I don't believe that Steve has enough time to join us on a regular basis to talk Michigan football, but I will certainly make that attempt because it is a great time with Steve Deace Michigan Podcast. Also, keep in mind that you can catch me and Pigskin Pete on his channel every Monday at noon for College Football Coast to Coast. That's a great time as well. College Football Coast to Coast every Monday at noon on Pigskin Pete's channel with me and Pigskin Pete. We wrap up the previous weekend. We get you all set for all the big matchups coming up the following weekend in college football. Again, I'm on with Steve Deace, our 10-minute war. And then you can just keep it locked down here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, for college football coverage like nobody. All right, give me your recommendations, your suggestions, your requests for any content that you would like to see. Keep in mind that if you suggest anything and I don't get to it, there's typically 2 reasons why. Number 1, it's an off-season topic. If you ask me to rate the 10 greatest quarterbacks of all time or the 10 best programs of all time, we will get to it in the off-season. We're talking college football 2020 right now. And the other would be that I've determined that, unfortunately, for as much as I would like to talk about the Indiana running back situation, and I will do that. If you look back on my old videos in particular, I would break down every possible position unit in the country. We would talk Iowa's defensive line. We would talk Oregon's linebackers. We would go through everything nuts and bolts. Okay. Most of you don't want to hear about that. Unfortunately, I do. Most people don't. So we've tried to go more big topic, and that's what we've got to do more in the future to bring in the droves of folks that we need to have here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. And I would ask all of you to like the videos, subscribe, of course, share the videos on social media, and keep it locked in here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We will see everyone tomorrow. That would be Thursday at 2 o'clock Eastern time, live right here. Hit the bell for the notifications, and you will see the live stream coming out at 2 o'clock Eastern time, and then 8 o'clock Eastern time on Thursday as well, before we do our Buckeyes live back here on the main channel on Friday at 1 o'clock Eastern time, right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Let's see if there's anything else in the comments section. And yes, I need moderators, and I'll get to that. This is the to-do list, and there's a bunch of other stuff on there. There's way beyond that needs to be added to the to-do list, but the to-do list involves eating right now. So we're going to get to that. All right, everyone. We appreciate it. Keep supporting, and I will keep delivering even better. See you next time.